So now we'll go to the session 2 from here. So the session 2 will basically walk us through and take a little more deeper dive than what we covered in the episode 1 on the content architecture. The session will talk about what are the various type of content enabled, the content tools and features which are enabled out of the box in Sunbird, and how these are enabled from a tech design perspective, and what you can probably do beyond what is there out of the box, what possibilities you can basically enable through the configuration and extension to take out of the box stuff and take it forward. Let me introduce the speakers today: Kameswararao, product manager, EkStep Foundation, and Rayulu Villa, principal architect, Sunbird, and managing director, Sanketika Consulting. Welcome both of you, and over to Kamesh.
Thank you, Alok. I think you had a very interesting section about the learning anywhere consumer apps. Now, I and Rayulu will go through the deep dive into the content architecture, like what Alok was mentioning. What are the various types of content support that Sunbird as an infrastructure provides? What are the various tools and services to create, manage content? We'll have it in two parts. I'll take you through the deep dive into the capabilities, and then Rayulu will be taking you through onto the deep dive of the architecture of how this entire thing is modeled and designed. Yeah, so let's start off. Just for a recap, the Sunbird as an infrastructure, it tries to generalize the entire different set of learning use cases into three personas and three scenarios and two interactions. The three personas being the learner who learns, instructor who helps learn the learner, and the administrator who manages the learning processes. And the entire interactions can be broadly classified into the learning interaction and the administration. And then we have the learning improvement loop, which starts with learn, then you interact with either other learners or the instructors, do certain activities, and then do assess or sense the progress, and then the loop of learning continues. In this, the learn and the do and various parts of this loop, the key part is the content, right? Yeah, this slide actually gives goosebumps to me every time I look at it, because it kind of throws like how much innovation that can happen in terms of the variety of content that can enable rich learning experiences, right? For example, there could be, the content could be audiovisual explanation of certain concepts, or it could be animating stories and poems which bring them alive. The content again could be interactive activities which make learning fun, or it could also be content, for example, for the teachers in terms of how they can plan their lessons, right? Or it could be reference materials that the instructors can use when they are training the learners. Thinking a little bit more innovative, we can even have digital simulations, which basically give virtual environment for the learners to experiment and practice. It could be, the content could be virtual reality or 3D content. It can even be virtual labs where an online experiment lab is available for the students to experiment, right? So the possibilities are kind of limitless because of the advancement of technology, and we can think of a variety of digital content that can make learning experience richer and richer. The Sunbird as an infrastructure has a very potential way of enabling these variety of contents It's essentially how innovative the adopters are in terms of providing these enhanced capabilities in terms of the type of contents that you support in your solutions. So moving on in terms of how all this can happen as part of the Sunbird infrastructure, what are the various tools that it supports? The starting point, which is a fundamental building block, is the learning asset of the content architecture. So any content in Sunbird is encapsulated as a digital learning asset, which has multiple dimensions, starting from what the content is, for whom is the content, for what purpose, what formats that content supports, how you create the content, source it from others, and how finally you can access it and consume it. Right. So these are various dimensions of content which are encapsulated as part of the learning asset, which forms the building block of the content architecture. So I'll go through in detail what are all the various capabilities that architecture provides in terms of managing content. This is something which is I had briefly touched upon in my previous earlier sessions of an overview of the Sunbird sourcing capabilities. The fundamental the blocks that enable content management uh, are the asset models, right? Uh, they constitute of resources, plugins, which are very basic reusable blocks in the whole architecture. And then we have different types of objects like content, question, action, and combination of them, a collection of them, right? These form the common objects, generalized objects, which encapsulate the common properties and behavior. And the architecture enables you to extend these to your own domain specific content categories and based on your needs, right? So we'll focus in this session on the content object and see the various uh, dimensions of that content object and what can be stored, what can be created, so on and so forth. Example of this is the underlying object, generalized object is a content. You can take that and configure it in your domain, which enables a specific type of content category. For example, a story is a content, a game is a content. You can create, for example, if you are, let's say, using Sunbird to train medical staff, right? Maybe a medical manual is a category that you want to define, but the underlying object is the content, right? What does it enable? What it enables is that when you want to extend or adopt Sunbird to your requirements, it's completely becomes configurable, right? You don't need to create new APIs to create new content types of content what you have, right? As long as the common set of data that the content object provides suffices, you just need to configure that with a new category and then start using it. An example, couple of examples which I can show you of content categories is lesson plan and simulation, for example. This category, what it encapsulates and what you can configure in a category is the object type, which is content in case of content, the various MIME types that the content supports, which are nothing but the file formats, and the various metadata and behavior that you want to, which are relevant to that content category. Example could be you can create a content category as a lesson plan, which supports MIME types of a PDF and an EPUB, and audience is preset as a teacher, right? Or you can configure a content category as a simulation content, right? You want to create and manage a content which is a simulation, which might be a MIME type is a HTML5, and the audience is student, right? So what this asset model and the categories ensure is that the underlying object which manages is same. You can extend it and configure it for a specific domain categories uh, based on just the configuration. Uh, moving on a little bit more details on what are the different attributes in metadata model that Sunbird has. These attributes can be either information or additional data about that content. For example, name, description, keywords, audience, all these are certain information about that content, right? Or the attributes can be also which define the behavior of the object, right? For example, an attribute like whether the content is a trackable content, right? Whether the content object is trackable, which means that for every user who consumes that content, for example, if a user is consuming a PDF, right? Uh, how much has he completed? You can track the progress, right? And similarly, another example of a behavioral attribute is visibility, which can control to whom and in what context is that content visible, right? For example, you can define if a content is defined as a public content that can be available for everyone to access. It could be protected, which means that it's accessible only to a certain organization. Private could mean that it is accessible only to the creator of that person. For example, if that content is something that is not to be used by anyone, like for example, when somebody wants to create an exam paper, right? They may not want to expose it to everyone, right? So it can be protected to certain organization only to access it, right? Or it could be visibility, could be a parent, which means that that content is always accessible as part of certain collection, right? This is just an example of one of the behavioral attributes. There are a bunch of a set of attributes, master set of attributes that are part of Sunbird, which again can be extended through configuration. And when we are defining a content category, we can define what are the subset of these attributes and whether they needs to be defined by the user, which means the values have to be provided by the user, or they are pre-configured to certain predefined values, or certain attributes can be system derived, right? For example, when you are uploading a file, the system can automatically detect the extension and set the MIME type accordingly, right? So these are a set of metadata attributes that content can be tagged to. Moving on, another important component of this whole metadata tagging is the taxonomy frameworks. A taxonomy framework is nothing but a set of related attributes, right, with a predefined values. For example, if you want to tag a content to a curriculum, right? I want to say that this content is for a student studying in Maharashtra board, right? In class 8 in English medium, right? So these attributes like the classes, the subjects, the mediums supported within a board, these are all related attributes, right? For example, a subject like environmental sciences would not be there in probably in class 9, right? So these taxonomy framework gives a way of defining these kind of attributes which are related to each other, and then enables you to tag content to these attributes. It can be used for organizing how you organize the content, as well as it will help in better discovery, right? If I declare myself as a student of Maharashtra class 8, the system can pick up the relevant content for you based on this framework tagging, right? And these frameworks can be different for different purposes. For example, a completely different framework could be for tagging teacher training courses, right? Where you would not probably have classes, right? You might have something like different skill sets and different topics that are taught in the training, and so on and so forth. So it's up to you to the solution person to define those frameworks based on the domain, and then without any code, explicit code to be written, uh, through the configuration, the Sunbird provides a way of tagging content to different frameworks. Moving on, into the life cycle of a content object, it starts off with a draft state, where once a creator creates a content by default and saves it, by default it is in a draft state. The creator can work on the content and finally submit it for review. It will go to the review state, where a reviewer can view the content, and if he or she wants to have certain changes, they can send it back to the creator for changes, which will go back to the draft state. The creator can rework on it, submit it again, which then comes back to the review state. And once the reviewer approves the content, it is packaged and published and becomes live for the consumers to access, right? And when the content is packaged, the Sunbird has the processes jobs which also create offline package to a content, where the content can be used in an offline scenario, right, without a network. Of course, certain type of content, like for example, YouTube videos cannot be played offline, but any content like a video or a document or a content created on the platform can be consumed offline. And certain content like videos, audios, so on and so forth, they can also be streamed online. So these are the capabilities that are present within the publish flow, which enables different types of consumptions. And once a content is published, it can again be modified by the creator with certain updates. It will then create a new version of a draft, which will be in draft. So at that point of time, there'll be two versions, one in a draft version, which the creator works on, and then there's a live version, which is already published, right? And this new draft version undergoes the same cycle of review. And once it is published, this published new version is replaced with the old version, right? So at any time, a content object can have either just one version, which is a draft or a review or a live, or it can have two versions, one in a draft or a review state and other is in a live state. So that this is basic life cycle of a content object that is supported as part of the Sunbird. And we also have a lot of tools to create, edit, review content. And a very important feature is that it supports all major Indian languages. So the content can be created, consumed in most of the major Indian languages: Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, Gujarati, Sanskrit, even Urdu is also supported, apart from, of course, the English. There are also interesting features of how multiple creators can collaborate and create the same content. You can also preview the content, how it looks when it's consumed, and so on and so forth. And there are different editors, like there is an inbuilt editor which creates, which can be used to create a presentation kind of or an interactive content. You can also create content offline. For example, you create a PDF or a video with offline tools and then upload it. So there's an upload editor to upload content also. And the editors also support forms to how you edit various metadata of the content. And again, these forms are completely configurable. When you are defining a category with a set of attributes, you can configure how the form should look like, what are the attributes that the users have to give, and you can say whether it's a mandatory, non-mandatory, what are the default values to be taken, so on and so forth. And these are editors are also extensible by creating new plugins, right? What do we mean by plugin? Plugin is a reusable asset which can be used to create multiple contents of a similar nature, right? For example, Sunbird has already certain set of activity plugins, both for numeracy and literacy. For example, a plugin to create activities which allow users to order numbers, right? It can be like a very interactive way of creating that. And then the plugin, what it enables is the creator can specify, okay, how many numbers, what complexity of numbers, is it 2-digit numbers, 3-digit numbers, and so on and so forth, and create n number of activities out of the same plugin, right? And or the plugins could be a simple widgets like a scribble pad, for example, which can be embedded in multiple contents, which allows end users to free flow text or drawings that they can draw through the scribble pad. Or widgets could be something like a timer, which can time how the user is consuming the content. And again, these are some set of plugins which are available by default in Sunbird already. It can be if you are interested in contributing, plugins, new plugins, you can very well do it, and it can be easily plugged into the system. And of course, we think you have seen the content players capabilities in detail in the previous session. We do also have a lot of different types of players to play different type of content, like PDF player, a video player, and a player for playing the content created within the using the Sunbird editor, and so on and so forth. And they also have very extensible capabilities where you can create new players for new type of content that you want to support and plug it in. Currently supported formats in the content formats in the system are PDF, HTML5, EPUB, and different types of videos, which are like MP4 and WebM formats, and also YouTube videos. And then content that is created using the content editor of Sunbird is stored in an ECML format, which is a Sunbird specification. And it also supports H5P content. H5P is a kind of an extension of HTML to create interactive content. There are tools to create H5P content. You can use those tools, create H5P content, and upload onto Sunbird system. And it also supports audio files of MP3 format. And again, I think this has been also touched upon in the previous session. You can, if you want to support new types of content formats, like for example, if you want to support SCORM, or you want to support Microsoft PowerPoint, or for example, you want to support some accessibility content like DAISY, you are definitely welcome. You can easily create plugins either in form of editors or players and plug into that. Most probably they will not be requiring any new API. It will be all through configuration. Moving on, another important aspect of content is reusability, which I think by this time you would have understood. It is inbuilt within the architecture at several layers. The fundamental reusable assets like resources, like images, sounds, which can be used, which are stored as a individual pieces and can be clubbed together to create new content. And we have seen plugins, which can be like a question plugin or a teaching plugin or an activity plugin. An example for a teaching plugin could be a plugin which defines the structure of a lesson plan, right? And then any new lesson plans can be created in the same structure, right? And at the highest level, the content itself is reusable in two ways. One, the content can be packaged, same content can be packaged into different forms, right? For example, the same video can be part of a digital textbook, which is like a textbook that a child goes through, or the same video can be packaged as an assignment that is given for the student to work at home, right? And the content, if it is made public, can also be reused across organizations which use the same Sunbird system, right? We have multi-tenancy supported in Sunbird, where different organizations can use the system, and the content is reusable across those organizations. Uh, Again, content discovery is different modes of discovery. You would have seen it in the consumption apps presentation. That's all driven by the rich metadata tagging supported as part of the content model, and the search API that are exposed as part of the microservices of the content architecture. And these APIs can also be extended to enable new modes of discovery, right? The Sunbird itself, it started with a simple free text search. And then we have, put in a lot more modes of discovery that we have in the Sunbird. And last but not least, a very important aspect of content is curation, which is it's a continuous process of selecting and organizing content to make it more usable, relevant, engaging, and easier to discover, right? To make sure the content is not objectionable, you improve the quality, you remove the staleness, enhance the quality, and so on and so forth. Sunbird also has certain tools to enable this content curation, like it enables to capture ratings and feedback from the users, right? It also has a capability of flagging a content as an objectionable, and then you can build on your own workflows, right, on how you want to handle these flags. Of course, it also comes up with rich usage metrics, right? For example, how much the content is being used, how many people are using it, what is the last time that content is used, for example, can give you how stale the content is, right? And the tagging metadata model, what we have seen, also provides a lot of simple way of discovering the contents. So yeah, these are pretty much the key capabilities that the content architecture of Sunbird provides. Now I'll give it to Rayulu to go through the architecture of how this content is organized, a deep dive into it. So Rayulu, over to you.
Thank you, Kamesh. Okay, I'll share my screen just a minute. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hope my screen is visible. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. So as you have seen earlier in this session, Sunbird content can be used to build solutions for a variety of use cases like digital textbooks, lesson plans, games, stories, and many more. There are a lot of capabilities that are provided by this infra, and also there are wide range of possibilities that can be imagined using this infra. So today I'll do a deep dive into the architecture and walk you through those building blocks that are powering this content architecture in Sunbird. Okay. Basically, the main principles of the architecture are three. One is generalization, which Kamesh has talked a lot. I'm just reiterating it again. The objects and the blocks are generalized in the content architecture, generalized so that they are not specific to one use case, but many use cases can be imagined using the same generalized blocks. The second one is externalization. All the generalized components externalize their configuration using which many use cases can be configured. And the third one is extensibility. The extensibility is enabled by plugins, processing jobs, data products, and so on without needing to change the code. So with that, let's start. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So these are the building blocks of the Sunbird content architecture. They include a set of specifications, utilities, tools, a set of reference apps, uh, and solutions, and microservices and APIs. So the content model is at the core, which enables the configurability and extensibility of this whole content objects. And the content repository contains the content objects, their data, metadata, and the relations of those content objects with other objects. And microservices provide the APIs to work with both the content model as well as the content repository. And there are a set of tools like editors and players for creation and consumption of the content. There are multiple apps which provide the interfaces for the end users to create and consume the content. And all the apps, tools, microservices generate data for all the interactions, which we call referred to as telemetry data. That is used again to derive insights about the content usage and update the content repository back to enrich the content. So in this session, we will get into the details how each of these building blocks are covering the architecture. So start with the specifications part of it. The main advantage of a specification is that it ensures wide usage and reusability of the systems or products that are using the specification. There are multiple specs covering the content architecture. One set of specs are the media types or for the media types. And Sunbird has created two media type specs. First one is ECML, which stands for E-Content Markup Language, which is a specification for interactive content, creating and managing interactive content. Another media type spec is HTML5 archives. This is for creating HTML5 zip files that can be used as content. So HTML5 zip file can be created outside and uploaded to Sunbird as a content, as long as the zip file is adhering to the HTML5 spec published by Sunbird. In addition to these two, Sunbird supports multiple other third-party specs for content like PDF, EPUB, H5P, MP3, MP4, and YouTube videos are the specifications that are currently supported as Sunbird content. More third-party specifications will obviously keep getting added to this bucket. And there are a couple of other specifications created in Sunbird for different purposes also. One is a spec for defining the content model. We'll go into the details of content model shortly, but what this spec defines is a standard for defining the models, that is the schema. And the second spec is called ECAR, which stands for E-Content Archive Specification. This defines a standard format for creating packages that enable offline consumption of content. So ECAR spec compliant packages are created for all offline consumable content in Sunbird. And other standard open specifications like JSON and JSON schema are extensively used in the Sunbird content architecture. So moving on to the content model is at the core of the Sunbird architecture that powers the complete configurability and extensibility of the Sunbird content. So to put it simply, content model is similar to a database schema. We define data tables, columns, primary and foreign keys for a normal database. Here we can define the schema similarly for a content. The difference is that the database schema once defined is very tough to change, and the whole code depends on that schema. But the content model is dynamic and configurable. It can be updated anytime during the runtime also. So in a Sunbird instance, the content model can be configured, which drives the structure, behavior, and other aspects of the content objects in that Sunbird instance. Okay. There is a standard format in which the content model has to be defined. This standard is one of the specs you saw in the previous slide, the content model specification. So as per this spec, a content model definition contains the following. The first one is the attributes, the metadata attributes, which includes the data about the content and the behavior attributes of the content object. These attributes also include the taxonomy framework tags for the content object. The framework tags, as you saw in the earlier session by Kamesh, are used to define what the content is about and for whom it is for. Then the second part of the schema definition in a content model is relations. This part of the content model defines the set of relations that a content object can have with other objects like collection or a question set, etc. And then there is config, which allows you to configure some special behaviors of the content in that Sunbird instance. For example, the caching of content objects in a Sunbird instance can be enabled or disabled by configuring it in the content model. Then the second set of definition is the category definitions. Category definitions allow you to configure domain-specific solutions. So Sunbird has a master list of categories that can again be configured at a Sunbird instance level, and a subset of them can have definitions at the system level. So, and content can be created for those categories which have a definition for them. You have seen the example categories in the session by Kamesh, how a lesson plan category is configured to have a different behavior and metadata than a simulation content. So in addition to the system level definitions, it is also possible for a tenant, as Sunbird is a multi-tenant support. There's multi-tenant support in Sunbird. A tenant can also create their own category definition or override the system level definition also. Okay, and the content schema definitions are in GitHub in this location, and which can be updated for the specific Sunbird installation, and both the master category list and the category definitions can be configured using this category definition APIs. Okay, let's now look at how a content model generally looks like. What are the different how the different configurations look like? So this is how the metadata attributes configuration in a content model looks like. The name is an attribute which has a data type of string. It can have validations like min length of 5, and it is specified that whether it can be specified whether that name attribute is a required attribute or an optional one. Similarly, status is another attribute which has some other configuration like the enum, which is the range of values the status attribute can have, draft, review, or live. And also a default value can be set for the status attribute draft. So another thing is, as you have already seen in the previous session again, is that some attributes are user defined, whereas some attributes are system derived. Status is one such attribute which is derived by the system and not provided by the user. Okay. Then the relations. This is how relations can be defined, configured in the content model. Here, if you see the example, there is a relation called collections. Any name can be used for that term. It can be called collections or it can be called ABC. But the important things in here, what is the relation type? Here in this case, it is a hash sequence member. Sunbird has support for a defined set of relations. These are some semantic relations which are implemented in Sunbird. Examples of them are sequence membership, association, parent-child, and some pedagogic relations like prerequisite and co-occurrence are also implemented. So any of these types can be configured. And the direction in here, the meaning of in means the content object is at the end node of the is the end of the relation. That is this sequence member relation is an invert towards the content object, and the start node of the relation is a collection. So this definition says a collection object can have a sequence membership relation with the content object. Likewise, there is another relation that can also be that is shown in this example, where a question set object can be associated with the content object using an association relation. And the direction is specified out here, which means the content is the start node of the relation and it has an outward relation to question set with an association. Okay. Then there is this configuration which defines different behaviors like the caching or version check mode. Version check is a capability which enables, which mandates a version key has to be sent in all the updates of the content. And if that version key is outdated or stale, the update fails. Then there is another configuration for external, which I will come to in a shortly in the next set of slides, where some properties of the content, some attributes can be defined as external. Then an instance can have a category definition at a system level. For example, a category called podcast, which can have these MIME types. Allowed MIME types could be video or audio. And the same category definition can be overridden by a channel one tenant, tenant 1 and say that the only all the podcasts for this tenant can only be of type audio MP3. Video is not allowed. And they can also set that all the podcasts for of this tenant have to be visibility of private visibility. Okay. So we can also look at this content model and content repository in an object-oriented way. I mean, if you are familiar with object-oriented programming and concepts, we have a concept of a class, which is a blueprint for an object, and object is an instance of that class blueprint. So we can imagine a content class that is the blueprint that gets created using the content model definition. So based on the definition which we saw earlier, a class contains something like this: the part metadata, and the metadata can have different categories of metadata: general, lifecycle, ownership. Then the other part of the class will be the taxonomy, which can have two types of taxonomy tagging: organization framework, which tells what the content is about, and target frameworks, which gives who the content is for. Then relations could be another part of the class, and the different types of relations as configured in the content model are the other properties of that relations. And finally, we have categories. So Sunbird content repository allows you to tag two types of categories for every content object. One is the primary category and other is additional categories. Primary category defines the behavior of the content object, like what MIME type, whether it is trackable, visibility, and other things, and also discoverable by the primary category. In addition, the Sunbird content infrastructure allows you to define multiple additional categories for the content object. This means the same content can be discoverable under as those categories also. So this is the typical structure of a content. Now, how this is how a content object looks like. The instance of the content looks like in an object-oriented world. So the metadata will have absolute values like name is XYZ, MIME type is MP4, status live, channel ABC, and the taxonomy tagging has NCRT, English, class, and maths. Then this content has relations with two collection set, and this content has a primary category tagging as podcast, but also additional category taggings like this, which allows the same content object to be available under those categories also in consumption. Moving on, so far we have seen the structure of the content. Now let's see the storage, how it is stored. The storage of the content is designed in such a way that the optimal storage structures are used for different parts of the content. This makes both the storage and retrieval of the content efficient. Uh, so the content object is stored in a graph store as a node. The attributes are stored as properties of the node, and relations are represented using edges. The graph is a directed graph. It allows you to query and navigate the graph using those edges on both the directions. For example, I can query all the content that are part of a collection by traversing the relation in one direction, and I can also get all the collections which are using this content by traversing the membership relation in the reverse direction. So that's the property of a directed graph. Then the external store is mainly used to store those attributes of the content that have very large values. Graph databases are not efficient to store large text values, hence a different data store. Cassandra in this case is used to store such properties. These properties are not hard-coded. The list of properties to be stored here can be configured in the content model using the external properties config, which we saw in the example, the external configuration. Then there is a such index that is used to index all the attributes and relations in a Solr-based index. This store enables a very flexible such capability on the Sunbird content repository. And finally, a blob store is used to store the content artifact files and media files. Blob stores are a lot more efficient in handling files than any other databases, hence the choice. Okay. We have seen how the content model enables a lot of flexibility to configure the schemas dynamically, and multiple stores are used to optimize the storage of the content. All this is handled and managed by the ontology engine module in Sunbird. The ontology engine interprets the content model definition. It manages the storage across multiple stores, updates and retrieval of the content from the repository. This module abstracts the underlying complexity of the whole content infrastructure. So another thing the content, the ontology engine enables is one common ontology repository for all digital learning assets. So this allows all learning assets and the taxonomies to be stored in a single graph and a single repo. And because of this single repo, content can be added to collections related to question sets or other content belonging to the same taxonomy or a different taxonomy as well. And while ontology engine provides the generalized capabilities and core capabilities, the microservices and APIs provide the wrappers around the ontology engine for functional workflows like review, publish, flagging, etc. So, and the ontology engine is embedded in all the microservices for the correct management of the objects. And these are the different set of APIs in the content, content management, category management, and content search APIs. So moving on, uh, and the content architecture has a processing pipeline to which APIs and the content repository publish all the content processing events. That is, when the content is created, updated, or its status is changed. And there are a set of jobs listening for these events. They do some processing and update enrich the content either for optimal consumption, discovery, or curation also. Some example jobs are these search indexer, which listens for every update on the content and indexes that updated data into the search index to enable searching on that new updated data. There is a video streaming job which for every MP4 content that is published, this job picks up that MP4 and creates a streaming version of that MP4. And some of these jobs also again generate events and publish it back to the pipeline. And there can be jobs subscribing to those events and do further processing also. And this event-driven approach allows you to extend the core of the content infra by developing new jobs and subscribing to events in the pipeline. Okay. Moving on to the tools, the content editor tool provides the user interface for creation of the content. The editors use a common framework which provides the base services and utilities that can be used by the editors. These base components include the API services, telemetry generation and syncing with the server, and an event bus for communication between plugins and the framework. Basically, there are two editors. One is an upload editor for uploading content, which support multiple media types, and one is an interactive editor for creating interactive content, ECML interactive content. So, and as we saw earlier also, the plugins which can be created that can be used by editors to extend and enable new features inside the editors. So you can extend the behavior and enable new features in the editors by building and contributing these plugins. There are also content layers in Sunbird, which are covered in detail by Namrata and Santosh in the earlier session. So I'm not covering them again here. Uh, Coming to the apps, a multi-app strategy is adopted in Sunbird, and multiple different apps are created for creating, managing, and consuming content in Sunbird. This strategy actually lets each app have focus on specific users, use cases, and workflows, and enables us to fine-tune that app to best serve the intended purpose. So we have a sourcing portal which is specific, which focuses on the creation and review and publish of the content. We have apps, consumption apps for consumption web portal, mobile app, and desktop app for the consumption of the content. This architecture also separates the sourcing repo from the consumption repo, which helps in better management of the repositories. For example, the repo with a higher usage can be scaled more than the other, and consumption repo will only have curated content. This eliminates the risk of end users getting to see inappropriate content. All the apps are highly configurable. New content types can be enabled by configuration, and the styling is externalized, which enables us to create new themes easily. And as we have been telling many times, data is the most important aspect in this architecture and across Sunbird. So the every block, every component generate data for every interaction. The data is generated as per telemetry spec, which is a spec followed across Sunbird for data. The telemetry data is ingested into a largely scalable pipeline. There are data products which consume this telemetry data, derive the insights, and update the content repository back. Uh, uh, the data products available for computing the usage summaries and ratings, which can be used by the content creators to improve the content. And again, this data infra is also extensible. New data products can be created and deployed to create, new data products can be created and deployed to create more insights. So let's just do a quick recap what all we talked about. We saw the specifications that the content architecture uses. Uh, then the content model allows us to configure the schema and category definitions. Content repository contains all the content objects and store them in multiple stores. The microservices and APIs, they use ontology engine and different set of APIs are exposed. There are events generated by both the APIs and the repository, which are processed by an extensible pipeline. Then we have the tools, editors, and players which support multiple media types, extensible and which are extensible via plugins. We have different apps for different specific purposes across sourcing and consumption. Then all interaction data is generated at telemetry and ingested into the telemetry pipeline. The data products derive insights and update the content repo back again. So this is the lay of the land for the whole content architecture. And let's finally look at one quick example how this can be used to create a new content type, let's say called presentation material, which is of a new media type new media type Microsoft PowerPoint. So what do we need to do? So first thing, update the content definition to add the new MIME type MS PPT, Microsoft PPT to content model. Then configure a new category definition for presentation material, and the definition says the MIME type should be PPT. Uh, then build the editor plugins and renderers for PowerPoint. And in case if the new content type doesn't require a new media type, the only thing needed is to just configure the forms. Configure the forms in all the apps to create, discover, and consume the new content type. Finally, create jobs for any custom processing of the new media type if required. For example, if we want to convert the PPT to a video to make it playable on older versions, we could do that by adding a new processing job also. So this is just one example of how the content architecture can be used to realize any use cases. There are many use cases that can be enabled by using this infra as is or just by configuration also. Okay, so hope this session helped you to get a high level understanding of the content architecture and enable you to imagine the possibilities you can do with this. So thank you for joining in, and so we can Alok, back to you if there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ralu and Kamesh. So yes, there are questions. Let me start. So your first question is, can we show the length of the video as one of the examples of content being watched by a user in context to the total, length of the video, or show some percentage? Is that possible? Is it out of the box or something, adopter can extend?
Yeah. Okay, I'll go for it. Okay. Yes, it is not provided right now out of the box, but is possible. So as we showed, the content model can be configured to add a new attribute called duration, which can be captured from the creator, or can be auto-derived by a processing job by the platform. And once the total duration is available, the content layers can be extended to build the capability to show the amount percentage of completion.
Hmm.
That
Okay.
is how it can be done. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. We talked about various content. We talked about different languages being supported by Sunbird. Can as an implementer of Sunbird, in my own need, can I enable discovery through voice? There are many voice based solutions today. Google Home, Amazon Alexa, and others. How do we, do it? Is it available out of the box? And any points we need to keep in mind, or anything which Sunbird enabling to handle the different pronunciation of multiple languages being very different?
Okay. Kamesh, you want to go or shall I?
Go ahead, Ral.
Yeah. So yeah, so as we saw, content has both the parts, right? The data and the metadata. Uh, so the metadata defines the structure of the content and sorry, data and the schema of the content. Uh, we have so far provided different such interfaces as Kamesh shown by text, by QR code indexing, and all those things. So basically, these interfaces are converting the whatever the users input into a format understandable by the content search API. So it's then there is nothing needed in the infrastructure to be changed to support a voice-based search. If we have a tool which converts the voice to text, then rest of the capabilities are already available inside the infrastructure to do the voice-based search.
Okay, so pretty much, the adopter can extend the existing Sunbird to enable the voice-based discoveries. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Another question: blob setting is public and it allows the content to be downloadable. Does Sunbird allow the implementer to enable a private access blob for content storage?
Yes, right now that out-of-box Sunbird only works with public blob storage. Um, we are working, there's a feature to enable private content in Sunbird out of the box also. But there is an adapter who already did that. They took the Sunbird, they used a private blob storage to store the content, and they enhanced the consumption apps to send an authentication token to get the content from the private blob storage. So
Okay,
it's definitely possible. Yeah.
okay. So again, implementer can enable this.
And as I said, one implementer already did that. It's
Okay.
not open source though, but yeah,
Sure,
it is
sure.
there.
Okay, understood. The other question, we talked about translation and how, India, has multiple different languages. Any capabilities which are there to easily reuse content, across different languages? Um, is that something which can be, extended or implemented by a adopter?
Yeah, yes, Alok. Actually, this we are also in the process of experimenting with different tools. There is a whole open source Anuvad project, which is basically for judicial document translation. But we are also looking at how that can be integrated into Sunbird to enable translation of content in multiple Indian languages. And also there are certain tools like RadioWiki, which we are also looking at how it can be integrated to easily make video translation enabled. But yes, the architecture provides ample ways of how these can be extended.
Okay. So there is no, I mean, if I understood you, Kamesh, you're saying, look, there are possibilities as an implementer. The Sunbird architecture allows you to use any mechanism, your own solutions, your existing out of the, existing solutions in the industry, out in the, whatever is possible. There is no restriction. Is that correct, Kamesh?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Okay. One last question. So, Kamesh, you talked about the review as one of the stages of a life cycle of a content. Can you elaborate that if I, as an implementer, wants to adopt Sunbird, and if I have needs to have a need where I want to enable multi-stage review, is that something already available? Is something I can do, and how much of coding versus configuration I can leverage?
Multi-level review right now it's not a configurable setting, but it can definitely be extended to make it like a set it as a configurable piece of number of levels that you want to go through. Currently, it supports a single review of life cycle. However, we also have put in mechanisms where when a content is sourced from external people, right? There are tools where the organizations can say that these are my content needs and get the content from source from external people. At that time, we do have a kind of multi-level review where the organizations can have their own review and then submit it to the organizations who want to publish content, and they can again have a second level of review. So that's something which is enabled now. But yeah, for more complex workflows, it can be extended.
Okay. So I think we are over time. Thanks, Kamesh and Ralu, for your session. I would request all the participants, I see there are a few questions which I couldn't take. If you are keen to engage on those questions, please go to sunbird.org on community page. There is a GitHub discussion forum. So I'll urge each of you to take your, either unanswered questions or further questions on the GitHub discussion forum, so that we can also respond to them.